Hello, 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 ladies. Welcome again to Own Your Yes Live. I am your host, Valera Wilson, and author of You're Absolutely Worth It. And Own Your Yes is the conversation and time during your lunch break or whenever you watch this on demand for us as women to hear from other resilient, brave women who are sharing their stories of success and the challenges to get there so that we can all learn and thrive right along with them. So this is not for the perfect woman. This series is for the imperfect, ambitious woman who wants to succeed. So real conversations are what we're having here. And I am so excited today to talk with Penny Phillips, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, but we're going to be talking about a topic that I love, which is showing up despite the fear. And I think we can all agree that that is something that we can never stop learning because there's so many different levels. So thank you again, Penny, for joining and having the conversation with us today.
Oh, thank you. I showed you. I'll show you again. Best book I read last year. It's an honor to be here. So thank you.
You are so welcome. So we're going to jump right in. So tell us about yourself and what you do for
Yes.
those that are listening.
Penny, I'm from New York City, born and raised here, and I am the co-founder and president of an RIA called Journey Strategic Wealth. Just launched that business actually a couple of weeks ago. And I'm also the founder of Thrivos Consulting, a consulting firm specifically for financial advisors and institutions, helping them manage change and thrive.
Awesome. Well, I'm like, wow, you have another company that you've launched. And I think that's just amazing. Not just have one, but like two businesses that you are leading and growing and developing. And you're in an industry that is often, said not to have a lot of women represented or a lot of women thriving in that industry. So talk us through what that's been like for you and the challenges that you faced as you've developed the business.
Yeah, it's been challenging. I think we can all agree this is a male-dominated industry. I'm lucky to have with the New Business Journey 3 male partners. They're amazing, very supportive of all people, and I'm thankful for that. But it hasn't been easy. I mean, I think I've faced both sexism to some degree as well as ageism, probably more the latter, with people saying, you're too young to be doing this, or you're too green to be doing that. And so it's felt for a long time like it's showing up every day, getting ready for battle when other people just show up and, go to work normally. I think for us, it's constantly being prepared to deal with comments, deal with, opinions. And it's exhausting, but, I'm in a good position now and really happy.
Wow, that's good. And you brought up something that's really important. I think we talk about enough. There's sexism because of gender, but then there's also the ageism and, people thinking that you're, like you said, too young or too green and to do what you're doing. How have you had to really reset your mind to really think about, to really refute those comments or still show up?
Valeria, it's changed for me the last, 10 plus years. Early on, it was, you almost feel like you're just, you got to take the blows almost and not, respond or react and just sort of stomach it. And then at some point you realize that strength shouldn't be measured by how many blows you can take. Strength should be measured by how much you can fight back. And so that was a big mindset shift for me. And I honestly credit my family with that, having a strong support system. I say this story to everybody. I'm the child of Greek immigrants. My parents came to this country. I had no connections to the financial services business. Being able to go home and talk to my family about what I was facing at work and having them support me and say, argue back or leave that company or, remember where you came from, that gave me the courage. Not everybody has that support system. And it's really tough if you don't have people that support you, unequivocally.
Yes, that's a really good point, that support system. And you're right, some people may not have it in their family, but You're absolutely right. You've got to find it somewhere to have people in your corner like, no, don't take that. And you said something that was really, really good. And I think a lot of women could relate to that, of different, ethnicities. Strength is not necessarily to be measured by the number of blows you can take. Like that is let's put that as a hashtag, or that's a tweet all in of itself. It really is the ability to fight back. And so often we feel that like, I just got to take the high road and not say anything or not respond or not. And it's like, wait a minute, that's not strength. At some point, that's borderline allowing it to keep happening. So you've got to respond. So I love what you said, and that's very, very, true. And that's showing up, but showing up courageously to say, this doesn't work. I don't like that, or I need to move on.
Exactly. And, this is also generationally, I think it's changed because, decades ago, you kept quiet, you stayed at a company for 30 years, no matter what, or you stayed in a relationship for 30 years, no matter what. And that's changed. I don't know if it's the younger generation has changed, but that has changed. I've noticed that. I noticed it in myself and others. This idea that we're going to stay working under, leaders who in some cases are, psychologically abusive. It just, I wasn't going to do it anymore in any of the roles I was in. And I think I've seen more and more people feel like that.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. It's freeing.
You're right. It's free. And I think you're right. It has maybe something to do with generation and also seeing the effects. I mean, I was in a meeting with a senior leader, and they were talking about how, children pay attention to what their parents go through. And if you see your parents dealing with something that you don't see working out favorably for them, you make a decision that I'm not going to deal with that. And so generationally, the tolerance for certain things starts to maybe become less because you see the long-term effects. And so I think that's a really, really good point. In building your business, and I'm sure there were moments where you've struggled with fear. Where do you believe really those fears came from? What were some of the things that you had to face in the mirror, those fears?
First of all, every day, yes. And it's fears from multiple standpoints. And I separate it by personal and professional, although the two meld together sometimes. But, it's just fears that we're raised with. I am very vocal about, growing up with, a lot of anxieties and dealing with a lot of depression and just dealing with a lot of, mental stuff while also trying to show up and be a type A person at work. So it's fears that you have at home. You don't want to disappoint people culturally. You don't want to disappoint the culture because you're not, staying within a specific, gender role. So there's those fears that I think you constantly battle. And even as adults, still battle the fears and anxieties that we were dealing with as kids. But then it's the fear of, am I being perceived? It's always tied to what people think about us, right? To some extent. But how am I being perceived when I have to be a little bit tougher or fear? Dealing with the fear of being perceived a way we don't want to be perceived, or a fear of, of failing. And now not only have I disappointed the culture and the family, but now I've disappointed people professionally. So it's a lot to deal with. And I find that it's not that men don't deal with it, but I find that women just deal with these pressures in an exponential way.
Why do you think that is? And then how have you had to face them and deal with them? How do you keep, you mentioned a lot of layers, and it's so true. There's this intersection of a lot of different things: culture, gender, our own expectations of ourselves. How have you had to navigate that, and what have you had to shift and say to yourself in those moments?
I went through a period of time where it was, you start to doubt yourself. And a lot of that has to do with, be normalizing situations at work that shouldn't be normalized. And it wasn't until I actually left to launch my own businesses that I realized, oh my God, so much of that doubt and that fear was actually being, people were manipulating that. And anybody who's been in a really terrible work situation will know that all of those fears and anxieties that you have get heightened in a dysfunctional work culture. What I had to do was simply face it head on. And by that, I mean dealing with breaking down sometimes, dealing with having weeks where, it wasn't a great week, or I didn't show up the best I could. I've dealt with it all. I've dealt with, getting nervous and, passing out on stage. I've dealt with, breaking out in hives before having a big conversation. But when you know your worth and you have the people around you who are reminding you that you're good and you're accepted and you're okay just how you are, you can sort of carry that with you at work and use that as fuel to get through the rough days. But I don't have the answer to some extent, Blair. I still deal with it every day. So
yes, I think we all do. But and I love that you gave some examples of, being so successful, starting a business, running a business actively, but still dealing with very real emotions. And I think that's why we know this was titled Showing Up Despite the Fear, because I think so often we forget, or we think I'll show up when the fear no longer is there, or I'll show up when I'm confident. And that's just not the truth. The truth is that the confidence happens when you decide to show up despite the feelings of anxiety, whatever that might, self-doubt, all of those things are there, but it's choosing to step over them and still say, but I'm going to do this anyway. And to your point, it's like, there's days I'm like, oh man, this is a really big thing that I'm doing. I'm afraid to send this email, like tentative about, okay, are they going to say yes? Are they going to say no? Or, should I really say this in this conversation or in this meeting? But then I just say, just go for it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's all fuel to just keep going.
It's so true. And my favorite quote is by the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. The quote is, "I've been terrified every moment of my entire life, and I never let it stop me from doing anything." And that basically sums up my professional career is, there's always that, the fear of, and some of it's being an overanalyzer, as many of us are. High performers tend to be that way.
Yeah.
You can accept that anxiety and being over analytical is a gift and a curse sometimes, but a gift. It's what got us here. It's also what drives us crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If you can accept that duality,
yeah,
that's when you can fight fear on a daily basis powerfully. But you need a coach, you need a therapist, you need support, you need all the things. And I'm a proponent of all of that.
Oh gosh, you just want, those are all my go-tos: therapist, coach, people that are in my corner, your tribe. Ladies, if you didn't miss out, let's say it again: a therapist if you need one, a coach, and a tribe of people that believe in you, whether that's family, girlfriends, partner, whomever. You need all those things, because that's going to help you show up better. And I think sometimes we try to do it all on our own. And I'm an avid believer in getting help in every layer, right? I think of just like Serena Williams, for example. She has a coach. As great as she is, she has a coach because she wants to be good. She wants to be great. And it's so important, I think, especially when we're in those moments of doubt or whatever, we got to tap into our coaches, the people that fuel us and help us believe. And I'm loving the part about the duality again, because we can forget and I wrote an article earlier this week on LinkedIn about that, which is, giving imposter syndrome the name growing pains, because so often we forget, because we're high achieving women in particular, that means we're constantly going after things that are outside of our immediate reach. They put us outside of our comfort zone. And so that's where an imposter syndrome comes up. It's like that self-doubt. I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, because you've never done it. But the ambition is what keeps you driving towards the things you've never done. So it's like a never ending cycle, and we want to be perfect at it all, but we can't. So you got to just go through it.
And being okay with, and I am very vocal now with people in my tribe about, I'm mad at myself because I didn't do this perfectly, or because I, I didn't get to work out, or I can't get myself to wake up at 5 a.m. or whatever the silly stuff. And some of the stuff is bigger, more serious stuff, but you're not going to be completely perfect, but you have to find a way, I think, to ground yourself so that when that fear happens, you can, whether it's a phrase or a quote. I've always watched, Michael Jordan YouTube videos before I go on stage, because for me, I watched specifically the flu game when he played the Utah Jazz and supposedly had the flu, but getting inspiration from people who can really dig deep, teaching yourself to do that is beneficial. But I'll also say it's hard when you can't be sometimes what you haven't seen. And so for me, I talk a lot about this, not ever seeing a young woman in leadership in a business like the one I'm running now, you have no frame of reference. You make it up as you go. And that's a lot of women I know who are facing that right now.
That's really good. I love that you brought that up, because that's a very real challenge for a lot of women in corporate, as business owners, as first generation college graduates, myself, one of those first generation business owners. Being the first or being the only presents a lot of anxiety and fear. What did you do in those moments where you realize, okay, this is new to me, this is first? What are some ground things that you had to do to really start to feel more comfortable in the space that you're in?
Well, it's actually more of what I stopped doing, because what I noticed years ago was and I think I mentioned this to you at some point via email, I stopped allowing myself to be, mentored by people who, frankly, I didn't want mentoring me, or, or listening to people who felt like they knew, what my career trajectory would be. At some point I realized, first of all, these people don't really know me. And second of all, allowing somebody to steer your career for you or steer your personal choices, you're giving a tremendous amount of control. And so taking that control back and only allowing people to give me opinions who I really trusted and valued, that was a game changer for me, because those people who I trusted, and anybody who's been especially this business, you work with a ton of different leaders in this business. Not all of them are good people. That's not a secret. And so you've got to be careful with who you share your, I won't say weaknesses, but anxieties and fears with, because people can use that against you. Once you have a tribe that you can trust, and you can go to somebody and say, here's where I'm struggling as an entrepreneur, and here's where I want to go, life changes for you. And that's what happened to me when I launched my own business. I surrounded myself with people, with women and also men, who I could be honest about, like, hey, I'm feeling this fear today because of this, or I'm worried about how I'm going to be perceived. Help me get rid of that thought. Once I surrounded myself with those people, it became easier to step into these bigger roles.
That's really, really good. I love that you said what you stopped doing first, which is so important. And yes, I went through that similar experience early in my career with just someone that, leader in the organization, and thought that they had the answers for me. And because I didn't necessarily want to work for them in the job that I didn't want to do, that, something was wrong with me. And I had to think, wait a minute, I'm driving my career. You're absolutely right. Is that sometimes being the first or the only doesn't mean that everyone gets to pour into us. We got to be selective on who we actually allow to speak to us.
That's right. And also, just because somebody is revered and highly, successful and praised, doesn't mean, number one, that they're the best at it. Number two, you should follow them. Or number three, they have a right to say what you should or shouldn't do. And candidly, when I launched my first business, I had a lot of people say, this space is oversaturated. I don't, think you're going to have, be able to build credibility with advisors. And the minute I heard that, I said, oh, okay, this is exactly what I should do if this person is telling me this. So, a lot of times you got to take the feedback with a grain of salt, and sometimes you use it as fuel to prove everybody wrong. So
I'm with you. Let's prove them wrong, right? Let's completely prove them wrong. And you know what? That's the showing up piece of it, right? At some point, just believing in you and not in what everyone else is saying about you, particularly if it's not supportive and directional or constructive, right? There's feedback that you may not want to hear, we may not want to hear, but is it constructive? Is it helping us push forward, or is it just tearing us down?
right.
I love that.
Yeah. And I'm more of an assertive person, so it hasn't been difficult for me to be, confrontational, let's say, when I needed to be, in the sense of I could find the words and I was able to be face to face with people. But there are a lot of women who I've spoken to who are really unhappy in their roles, or who have left roles and have stayed completely quiet. And those women, I want them to find the method to share what's really on their minds. And it doesn't mean you have to have a different personality or become assertive, but we have to create a space for those women to be able to talk about what they've experienced and maybe be their voices for them if they can. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, now that I own my own business and can do that for people, unlike what I was able to maybe do within, a corporate structure.
That's a really good point. And you're right. When you mentioned that, I think sometimes maybe we can associate a personality type with being more courageous. And it's like, that's actually not the truth. It's all about you being courageous about what's important to you. And I think you got to find a why. Why are you doing this? And I think I even talk about that in the book, and just sharing, like, when you ask for something, you're not just asking for yourself, you're asking for your legacy, because what you don't ask for, your legacy is impacted by. What has kept you going forward? What's your why?
It's two things. Number one, it's my family always. And I say this to any new team members I brought on board. There's absolutely nothing more important than family. That could mean different things to different people. It could mean friends, it could mean close connections, it could mean your nuclear family. For me, there's nothing more important than that. There's nothing more important than ensuring that, my family is cared for the long haul, that I am, and so that drives me. I often joke, like, in a past life, I don't know what I was doing in a past life, but I'm constantly thinking about, how can I make my parents and grandparents proud and ensure that, my parents could, retire whenever they want to. That drives me. But the other piece is being a product, growing up in New York City, being a product of the New York City public school system, going to university. Shout out to Macaulay. I'm now on the board of Macaulay. For me, it's not every, and I understand this, not every child has the ability to go to an Ivy League school. Not everybody can afford that. I remember interviewing for jobs right out of school and saying the name Macaulay. Nobody had ever heard of that school. It's a tiny school. And being really confident to say that, and educating people who were interviewing me about the program I was a part of. We need to give more opportunities to people who don't have access and connections. And
yes,
and people have given me access, and I have in turn now giving people access to things that I have access to. We have to do that for people. There's no other way. I call them the diamonds in the rough that people. For me, it's the New York City public school system, because I grew up in New York City, who will, not have the same opportunities simply because of whatever it is, zip code, financial situations.
Right.
We have to change that, and it has to be done by people like me who've made it out of the system into these positions.
That's really, really good point. And I was reading a book recently, Bob Goff's Dream Big, and he talks about, identifying your why, because the why will push you when you don't feel like it. The why will push you when you don't feel like showing up. The why will push you when you want to stay stuck in fear. The why will push you beyond all your comfort. And if it's so important, I think, for us as women and men for that matter, to get our why. Why say this? Why avoid this? Why push forward? And I think for me, like you shared, for me, it's my family, knowing where I come from and the legacy that I want to leave, as knowing that my grandmother and my mother who raised me put so much into me in time. And I'm like, I am their living legacy. That's important to me. And then with my husband and making sure we have a legacy in the life I want to live. So it's that why gets me to open my mouth and say things that I'm sure fear would love for me to just keep quiet about. It's like, I can't do it. I just can't do it.
I totally get it. And it also grounds you to some extent.
Yes.
You walk this earth having something that you're, passionate about and driving you. And that's a beautiful thing. And, for me, I'm very close to my family. We're Greek. We live all 2 minutes from each other, too close, maybe sometimes. But there's something nice about that. And it's funny because they have no idea what I do for a living. They have no idea, anything about what I do professionally. But when I'm there, it's just clearly they drive me. So
that's so funny. I hear that from a lot of successful women, by the way. We're all saying like our families have no idea what we do, but they just ask questions. We're like, we kind of just throw it off because like that takes too long to explain it. Am I just the only one? It sounds like you're like that too. It's like, yeah, I'm just doing that thing. Or my mom will be like, yeah, I saw something on Facebook that you're doing. Or I'm like, yeah, mom. I'm just like, you didn't tell me that. I'm like, this doesn't matter. It just, it's your mom. All right. It's just like, so that's the thing, just because you get to be yourself with them. It's not about what you do. It's, I'm just here with you and you know me before any of this happened and you love me for it. So I can, appreciate that. Wow. Les, I know we just got a couple more minutes. So tell us, what would you say, like that 2 or 3 things, or what message would you want to leave with any woman that's watching this conversation later that might be feeling like she's the only, or just struggles with fear and showing up? What would you say to her, Penny?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, if it's any consolation, just look at any Twitter thread or any Facebook thread where someone like either one of us has opened up and said, today was not a perfect day. Yeah. I'm upset with myself. I didn't get anything done. And read the comments and the people who say, oh my God, me too. I didn't want to say that out loud, or the DMs. And so if you test that, you'll get immediate validation that you're not alone. So do that. Open up to people, because being vulnerable allows people to see you and support you. The other thing I'd say, just broadly and professionally or personally in relationships, because a lot of times the relationships we have with leaders mimic sometimes the relationships we have with partners. If it doesn't feel right inside, and we all know that feeling, it's a physical feeling. This is not right. Something is off. Trust yourself in that. You have, the human body is what it is for a reason. And so trust that feeling, know your worth, and listen to very few people. That's not something I hear a lot of people talk enough about. Especially if you're a young woman, up and coming in the business, everyone will want a piece of you to some extent and will want to mold you. Listen to very few people, and know your worth. And listen to your body and your heart, because it'll usually tell you when you're in a situation that you should get out of professionally.
That's good. That's good. Know your worth. Listen to a few people. Make sure they're the right people, and trust yourself, and just keep going. I love it, Penny. This has been so awesome. I love what you've shared, all the nuggets and the gems. You're a phenomenal leader in your industry. So tell us how, if people want to connect with you or find you or your services, share that.
Yes. So journeysw.com, journeystrategicwealth.com. We're so excited about that business. We have an advisor, female advisor, joining us soon. We're really excited about that. And at Thrivos LLC on Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, often liking your posts. So find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And thank you to everyone who's watching this on demand, live. Thank you for watching. You can catch us every Thursday, 12 to 12:30 Eastern. So it's that perfect lunchtime break to get your dose of inspiration, courage, and confidence from other women who are resilient and ambitious and sharing their struggles on the path to success. Thanks again. Own your yes, ladies.